welcome to Relish Books. Today I am talking about For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway. Been working on this book for a while, but I made a commitment last week that I was going to finish it this week, and I pushed through and did. Making those commitments has helped me so much to just buckle down and get through the reading that I'm not maybe enjoying. Once again, I feel like the last few videos I've been really struggling to know what to say about the books I've been reading, and this is another one. It's a Hemingway, it's a classic, but it's really hard for me to say whether I actually liked it or not. There's so much going on in this book. There's so many elements that could be discussed. So many layers of culture, cultural reference, politics, people. Ultimately, it is a story about people. Just these small group of individual people, this very small group caught up in this huge, to them, great cause. But the cause is so large that, the large cause has no account or care for this small group of people that care so much for it, so to speak. I don't know, there's a lot of great themes, and I've really enjoyed some of Hemingway's writing. Don't love him as an author because it's funny he talks so much about cynicism in this book, because I find him a very cynical author. Doesn't necessarily make him bad, as he has heaps of ability. It just kind of gives a dark tone to his writing that, while I can appreciate the writing, he's not always the most enjoyable to read. This book was more enjoyable for me as far as it didn't feel as dark to me, even though it's still very serious. It didn't feel as dark to me as A Farewell to Arms did. That's the only other major novel I've read by him, I believe. I've read that one and The Old Man and the Sea and maybe like a couple short stories. But, his writing is interesting. I've always admired so much his simple and direct approach, even though he is very literary. His approach of speaking simply and directly when he's trying to convey very, very complicated and contradictory human thoughts and feelings. That happens so much in this book. That was really what slowed it down. I thought it was kind of interesting. Made it hard to read. It was a very difficult read for me. It made it hard to read, but it was interesting how the entire book takes place over the course of 3.5 days. 3 3/4, almost 4 days. The entire book takes place over this amount of time, and there's this impending action that has to be taken. It's this American Robert Jordan in the rural hills, mountains of Spain. He's there with a mission in this civil war to blow up a bridge. How and why he's there comes into the story, of course, but that's the basic thing. He's this American in among these people who he is different from, and he's there to further their cause, but they don't really count him as one of them. But he's there to blow up this bridge, and this plan is unfolding throughout the story. You're coming closer and closer to the actual doing of the thing, the big thing. The book happens over just a few days, and it should be this thing that is very intense, and possibly has a lot of action. And there are some really stunning action scenes, but most of it is actually very, very slow paced. A huge chunk of the book, I don't know to say a percentage, but so much of the book happens just inside the different characters' heads. They're thinking their different thoughts, but not the way characters in books usually do. They're thinking more the way that people actually do. Writing classes will always tell you that you have to make dialogue and conversation in a novel sound real without actually mimicking actual real dialogue, because if you listen to the conversations around you, there's so much repetition, there's so much excess, there's so much unnecessary stuff that if you actually wrote that down, nobody could get through it. It would just be would bore you to death. So you have to kind of give this sense of realness to something that does not actually represent the real thing. But I think he comes a lot closer to really being willing to spell out page after page after page of what goes through people's minds. Robert Jordan in particular, but a lot of the other characters that he kind of follows, he swaps perspectives with no kind of rules at all. He just will jump to different people's minds whenever he wants to. I guess he's Ernest Hemingway. He thinks he can just do that. And I guess he can, But yes, they'll be like thinking something, and then their thoughts will just spin around, and they'll get sidetracked and go off to this thing and that thing and the other thing, the way that real people's minds do. And yes, it makes it a slog to read, but it also is really, could be really interesting in a lot of ways. Not really my thing. I definitely understand how you could see a lot in the story. There is a lot in the story. But that part of it was a little much for me, even though I kind of admired his willingness to do that. It got to be a lot. Just this page after page after page of in somebody's mind as they're just thinking through, maybe they're thinking through relevant things, maybe they're thinking of whatever. Yeah. I really enjoyed the way that he portrayed the speech of the people. It was really fun because he is intimately familiar with Spanish, and there's a lot of Spanish in the book that's written, and sometimes it's translated and sometimes it's not. But you have to remember that most of the time any of the characters are speaking, they are speaking in Spanish, and the way that Hemingway has written it, he's written it in English, but mimicking the sound, kind of the feeling of a different language. I thought that was fascinating. The words that they use, the word choices, the way that a word pops out here and there that feels like it's had an interesting translation. I love that. I love the sense of, yes, we're reading in English, but we feel they're speaking in this other language. I think he did that really well. I enjoyed the characters. I really enjoyed all the small cast of surrounding characters, his fellow soldiers. I love the different perspectives on how they viewed this great cause that most of them don't really understand at all what they're really trying to do. They know they want to fight to be free, but most of them don't even really know what the party that they call themselves after really stands for or really means, which I think is actually true of most people, even today still. But yeah, to see their fierce, passionate loyalty and patriotism in the face of a lot of things that they don't understand. And yet they understand more about what things should really be about than all like the leaders and generals who are calling the shots on all these big things. I don't know. It's a lot to process. Clearly, I'm having trouble thinking it all through. But yeah, a lot to think about. Writing was definitely difficult for me. Did not love it. As a whole, I think the book is interesting. I definitely understand why it's a classic. But yeah, I didn't personally love it. The romance, so idealistic. I don't want to sound like a cynic. I feel like Hemingway would call me in the book. He would call me out for being a cynic. But love does not happen like that generally. And you can be like, it's in a novel and they are all dealing with the fact that they're almost certainly going to die very soon. I can understand how that would move you to act on things that you'd be a lot more hesitant to act on. But this deep, passionate love that is going to last to all eternity that they felt for each other at first sight, I couldn't really quite buy it. The dialogue was also so... It felt like it was just something that Hemingway was indulging himself in. I feel like it was clearly his dream relationship, his ideal of how love could be. And he just didn't hold himself back at all and just poured out what he wished could exist. But that doesn't feel that realistic, even though a lot of the dialogue is actually, a lot of the romantic dialogue between Robert Jordan and Maria is very sweet and very touching. You're kind of like, okay, they met each other 2 days ago. I I accept love can move really fast and hard sometimes, maybe, especially in the circumstances, but it's a little much. They're a little bit too impossibly on the same page. I don't know. I know that's probably part of the point, but it was a little much, even though the emotional side of me obviously was touched by it, and a lot of the dialogue was sweet and funny. I enjoyed their little I enjoyed their humor mixed into it. They weren't too serious. They play with each other, they joke with each other, which also I feel like is something that has to come with time. The playfulness and learning each other like that doesn't happen in a day. Their very ease that they have with each other is one of the most unrealistic parts, even though it's the most enjoyable and the most sweet. I don't know. Let me know what you think about this book, because it has me confused. I'm like, is it overrated, just kind of a rambly thing, or is it amazing? His depth of knowledge about politics and people in these different countries, these different nationalities, is really astounding. His just amount of information and knowledge that he has is amazing. And again, his writing is pretty incredible, how direct it is. I love that he keeps it direct, especially since it's like, okay, if you're going to go in these super complicated, long, drawn-out circles of thought, at least keep the writing simple. I do really appreciate that. But yeah, kind of a side note, someone that I was talking to the other day, a friend of ours, we were talking about Hemingway, and he said Hemingway only knew how to write about himself. Like his characters. He only could write himself. And I'd never really thought it that way before, but as soon as he said that, I was like, yes, that's absolutely true. Hemingway could only write about himself. And I think that kind of comes back to what I was saying about the cynicism of his books, because his books are all revolving around himself. They're all revolving around his view of things, and his feelings are seeping through more than with a lot of other authors, I feel like. And yeah, you feel, even though he is not one of those authors that inserts himself actively in the story, that absolutely drives me crazy, he's not doing that, but he is kind of behind the scenes completely inserting his personality into all of his stories. And that's why they're all so sad. Anyway, I finished it, and so I'm happy about that. Those are my thoughts on For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway. Let me know what you think. Tell me all the things that I have missed or maybe didn't mention about this book. Do you like it? Do you think it's amazing and great or not? Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.